Chapter 36 The Dark Powers. They stood at the entrance to the Amber Temple, knowing full well they might be walking into a trap. But what choice did they have? They needed to break the curse, and seeking out Mother Night was the only way. Carved into the mountain face were 6 towering statues of hooded, faceless figures. Between 2 of the figures was an open doorway and a staircase that descended inward. There was an almost inaudible sound of discordant whispers creeping out from the entrance. "I don't think Irina should go in," Navarra said. "You think we should split up?" Rowen asked, planting her staff in the snow. "I don't like it," Henry said. "Splitting up would mean Irina's left out here alone. Then again, this is where Strahd came to make his pact. If the Dark Powers are here, whatever they are, then her life is in danger." "The Dark Powers want to kill every incarnation of Tatiana," Navarra said. "Strahd told me himself that Irina would die if she went into the temple." "What do you think, Casimir?" Rowen asked. "I've only seen the temple from the outside," he said. "I've never gone in before." "What about you, Irina?" Henry asked. "Do you want to come with us?" "Of course I want to go with you," Irina said. "But—" She looked down the stairs. The strange whispering made them all uneasy. Irina shuddered. "What if Herkomoid stays out here with you?" Navarra asked her. "I can speak to him telepathically. He'll let me know if you're in danger and we need to come back." Irina agreed to stay outside with the pseudo-dragon, and Navarra warned everyone that they could not travel too far, otherwise the telepathic connection would become weak. "I need to be within 100 yards to hear him," Navarra said. Irina wished them luck. Rowen, Navarra, Henry, and Casimir went inside, with Apollo leading the way. But the sword's light was unusually dim, as if it were a candle on the verge of blowing out. At the foot of the stairs, they found themselves on a balcony overlooking a cavernous hall of black marble floors and black marble columns that stretched away into darkness. The walls were covered in an amber glaze that lent the gloom a golden sheen. "I've seen this place before," Rowen said, thinking of her dreams. She could see her breath as she spoke. Though it was too far to make out from here, she knew there was a faceless statue at the far wall, just outside the glow of Apollo's light. Navarra pulled the cloak Rowen had lent her around her shoulders. "I think it's colder in here than it was outside." 2 staircases flanked the balcony, like shiny black wings on either side of them. But did they dare descend into that inky void? Seeing an open door to their right, the 4 friends decided this side passage looked less foreboding than the vast chamber below. Through the doors they passed into an annex, their feet tapping on the marble as they walked, weapons drawn. The many side corridors led them through a disorienting maze of abandoned transepts and chapels. With stairs going up and stairs going down, it was hard to tell how deep they had gone into the mountain. But one thing was clear: the temperature was dropping the farther in they went, and the whispers were becoming louder. Rowen startled when she heard a voice by her ear, but when she turned around, there was no one. The voice had been so close she could have sworn she felt breath on her neck. Navarra covered her own ears. "It's no use," the warlock said, dropping her hands. "I can still hear the voices." Just as Rowen thought they might be swallowed by the labyrinth, they came to an open chamber with black floors and black marble columns. There was a balcony to the left, and a giant statue of a faceless, hooded figure to the right. They were back in the sepulchral void of the temple's grand sanctuary. Rowen saw her friend's reflections on the amber walls. Her heart skipped a beat when Henry's reflection stopped, shook its head in agitation, and gestured for them to go back. Meanwhile, the real Henry was still walking on ahead. Rowen was about to tell the others when something moved behind one of the pillars. "Did you see that?" Navara asked in a hushed tone. "Who's there?" Rowen called out. Her voice echoed unnaturally. Everyone stopped and watched as a hunched man came out from behind the column. "Don't hurt me," he said, with his hands up. He kept his distance, not fully coming into the light, but it looked like he had bruises on his face. A patch of hair was missing from his burnt scalp, and his clothes were in tatters. "Who are you?" Rowen demanded. "Please, my name's Vilnius." There was a tremor in the man's voice. "I am, or was, the apprentice of Jakarian. Maybe you've heard of him. The famous wizard from Ostmarch. My master and I came here days ago, but we couldn't leave. Every time we tried, we were attacked by the flaming skulls that guard the exit. They shot fire at us. My master is now dead, and I've been starving in this cursed place." Rowen eyed Henry. "Do you have it?" she asked him. "Right here," Henry said, and he pulled out his mirror. Vilnius did not have a reflection. "A vampire," Casimir said. "What?" the man asked. "Game's up, bloodsucker." Henry stashed the mirror away. Vilnius straightened his posture, and his voice changed to one of contempt. "I had to try, for my master." "Your real master?" Rowen asked. "Where is he?" Vilnius gave them a scornful frown. "The Count wishes for his bride and his mistress to give up their useless flight and join him at Ravenloft." "Tell us where Mother Night is," Navara said. Vilnius made no reply. Rowen pointed her spear at the vampire. "If you don't tell us, then we don't need you." Casimir held up the talisman, and his face hardened. Vilnius disappeared. "Where is he?" Henry cried. "Did you make him vanish?" "No," Casimir said, looking around frantically. "I tried to paralyze him with the talisman. It was like a battle of wills, and he got away." "I hear his footsteps," Rowen said, running after the sound. "We can't let him get away," Henry said. "Casimir," Navara cried, "let me use the talisman. I know vampires." Casimir hesitated at first, then gave it to her. Navara lifted the relic and closed her eyes. Immediately, the vampire's footsteps stopped. He reappeared just a foot away from where Henry stood, claws extended and fangs bared, but completely motionless. "Oh shit!" Henry shouted, and lopped off the vampire's head with one stroke of Apollo's blade. "I bet there's more of his kind lurking around." He closed his eyes and extended his divine sense. "Damn, this whole place feels like death." "We need to find Keithlin," Navara said. "If Vilnius contacted him, Strahd will know exactly where we are, if he doesn't already." "Navara, how's Irina?" Henry asked. After a moment, Navara said, "She's rubbing Herkomoid's belly. He usually doesn't like that, but he's tolerating it for her sake." Rowen turned to the towering statue at the back of the room. She walked up to its colossal feet. Shrouded under its stone hood was the same nothingness that had stared back at Rahadin in her dream, right before he swallowed the frog. The others followed her and examined the statue, casting spells to detect magic, but their spells revealed nothing. It was only when Rowen walked behind the statue that she noticed a part of the room's amber wall was an illusion. There was a door and a stairway leading upward away from the statue. They all followed the hidden passage until they came to a chamber that looked like a library. The whispers stopped as soon as they entered. Reflections of the torches on the walls flickered in the black, mirror-like marble, making it seem like there were many lights, yet all the many torches and reflections of torches were no brighter than dying fireflies. Bookcases lined the walls on 3 sides, and a stone lectern stood in the center of the room. At the back of the library, a golden marble staircase spiraled gently down a wide circular shaft into darkness, and across the ceiling was a sprawling fresco that depicted angels burning in a fiery lake. There was not a speck of dust nor a string of cobweb to be seen, but the smell in the stagnant air was not a clean one. To Rowen it felt as though nothing living had ever ventured into this place.
"Is that someone?"
said a gruff voice. To their left, interrupting one of the bookcases, was a wooden door with a small iron-barred window. The voice came from within.
"I hear you,"
it said. Rowen and the others slowly approached the side room and looked through the window to see a hunched figure hiding in the shadows. Rowen turned the handle. It was not locked, and the door creaked open. A vile stench assaulted their nostrils, and Rowen put a hand to her nose. When Henry lifted Apollo, casting light on the figure, Rowen shrank back. The creature standing before them was the most hideous thing Rowen had ever seen. It was clothed in scant rags, revealing withered breasts that sagged to its waist. Oozing pustules covered its festering skin from head to toe, and a gourd-like belly distended from its emaciated frame. 2 eyes, one slightly larger than the other, were set in huge sockets, their drooping lower lids a fleshy mass of red veins. Its wide mouth appeared to be fixed in a crooked frown, revealing half a set of sharp, crooked teeth. "Keithlin," Navara said. Rowen tightened her grip on her spear.
"Who?"
the creature asked.
"Mother Night,"
Navara said, walking further into the room. The creature grabbed her matted hair and cried,
Why do they torment me?"
Navara held out her hands, ready to cast a spell.
"We've come for you, Mother Night."
"Ah!"
The creature screamed and sank to the floor.
"There it is again, that name."
Her eyeballs swiveled up to Henry.
"Pretty man, here again, here to stay, here to go. You think I'm beautiful, don't you?"
"Who are you?" Henry asked.
"Who am I?"
The creature groveled at Henry's feet.
"Why do you pester me with things I don't know? But tell me I'm beautiful. Tell me—"
Her hands went for Henry's feet, but he stepped away.
"You're a hag,"
Navara said. She looked down at the creature with disgust and pity.
"Hungry arms of Hadar, what are you?"
The hag asked angrily and crawled through a pile of filth toward Navara. The warlock did not flinch when the hag reached her boots. Before touching the boot, however, the hag recoiled, and instead tried to wipe the grime from her filthy hands. Rowen glanced around the room. There was a soiled bed along the far wall, and a putrid heap of excrement in one corner.
"How long have you been living in this squalor?"
Rowen asked.
"Bones in cages hollering,"
the hag shouted.
"What questions? What questions? No!"
"We've come to ask for your help," Henry said, sheathing his sword. He held up his hands in a non-threatening gesture. But the hag ignored him when she noticed that the door to her cell was open. She stood up and walked into the library, looking around confused. Then she started hitting her own head with the palm of her hand.
"There it is again, that name."
"Stop doing that."
Navara came up to her and tried to prevent the hag from harming herself.
"Keithlin, please tell us how to break the curse."
"Call me beautiful,"
the hag snapped. Navara inhaled, then said calmly,
"Beautiful? Could you please tell us how to break the curse?"
Curses everywhere, not a single one to be seen,
the hag said, then slumped over the lectern in the middle of the library and moaned. She won't tell us, Casimir said. She's insane.
She has to tell us, Navara said. She's the only one who can.
Are you sure this is Keithlen? Casimir asked.
I'm positive.
Then, in a low voice, so the hag could not hear, Navara said,
Gostomir told me she would be the ugliest person I've ever met, and Strahd told me she was mad.
That sounds accurate, Henry said. Navara looked at the creature.
I just didn't think it would be this bad.
The hag was now licking pus from a busted boil on her hand.
In that case, Rowen said, Henry, is there a way you can cure her madness, like you did with Stella Vocta?
Do we want to be curing her? Casimir asked. Didn't Navara say she was a powerful fae?
It's true, Navara said. If we heal her, all her magic powers could return. She could put a spell on us. But we need her to remember.
Even if we wanted to cure her, Henry said, I don't have any more gems for that kind of healing. Navara looked around.
We have to find something that will jog her memory. What about the books in here?
She took a tome off one of the shelves and opened it. All the pages were blank. Henry took a different book. He flipped through it, then put it back and grabbed another. They're all empty, he said. There it is again, Casimir said, looking toward the dark shaft of the spiral staircase.
There what is again?
Rowen asked him. It's the second time I've seen a flash of light coming from down below. Rowen's eyes went wide.
What color was the light?
Blue. Rowen's mind reeled, and she quoted,
Blue to ancient magic's womb. Guys, Navara said anxiously, I can't hear Herkamoid. I didn't think we were too far away because I felt him earlier, but now I can't feel him at all. Not at all.
Rowen grabbed Casimir by the arm.
When did you see that light the first time?
It flashed a little while ago, right before we met Mother Night, he said. Rowen looked down the stairs.
It's a portal to Ravenloft.
Shit! Henry cursed and drew Apollo. As soon as the sword was out, sunlight revealed dozens of vampires crawling on the walls and ceilings all around them, and coming up the stairs, walking alone and confident, was Rahadin.
Uncle,
Rowen said. Rahadin glared at her. You've had a good run, he said, but your time is up. Now you must surrender or die. We will never surrender to you, Casimir said from under his hood. No, Casimir, that offer was not for you, Rahadin sneered. You will die along with the rest of your people. Did you not know? Strahd has sent an army to eradicate what remains of the Dusk Elves, to finish what he began. Traitor! Casimir shouted, pointing his wand at Rahadin. The horror that showed in Casimir's eyes was reflected in Rowen's own.
Why are you doing this?
Rowen asked. Rahadin said flatly, I do my duty to the Lord of Barovia, as is right. Unlike other elves whose defiance has brought about their own destruction.
So, Rowen said, anger creeping into her words, your master has sent his dog to do his dirty work?
Reclaiming my master's bride was a matter of duty, but what I'm about to do now is purely personal.
You'll never take Irina, Henry said.
I already have. A dim blue light flashed up from the stairs, and Rahadin looked down his nose at Henry. Anastasia will see Irina safely to her betrothed. A cry came from below.
Henry, help! They have me! Henry!"
"Irina!" Henry screamed, then spread his wings and flew down the shaft. Rahadin ignored him. "Stop this!" Rowen shouted, and leveled her spear. "It is you who must stop," he said. The vampire spawn were crawling down from the walls, closing in around them. Rowen stared at her uncle. Rahadin was her family. He was a dusk elf, and there were so few of them left. She didn't want to kill him, but she could not ignore Irina's screams, nor the screams of all those who had suffered or died by this man's hand. Rowen bared her teeth and embraced her rage, the rage she had inherited from her father. "So be it," Rowen said. "Just know, only one of us is coming out of this alive, and it's going to be me." She charged at Rahadin. Her spear almost found its mark, but in one motion Rahadin drew his sword and deflected the oncoming weapon. With his other hand, he grabbed the small buckler at his belt and slammed it in Rowen's face. She reeled backward, a trickle of blood running down her nose. But she ignored it and came on again. Rahadin's sword hummed as it whipped through the air, parrying and striking. Rowen soon found herself backstepping to keep him at bay with the tip of her polearm. She could not find a weakness in his defenses, and he was forcing her to give ground. "No!" Henry's voice shrieked from below. A moment later, sunlight shot up from the shaft, and Henry flew into the fray. Irina was not with him. The white-winged knight lashed out among his enemies with Apollo, striking them down like an angel of death. His every blow split a vampire's skull or spilled its bowels. Yet still more of the undead monsters flung themselves upon him in a wild frenzy, their skin blistering from the sunlight before they could even come to grips with him, and those that approached his sword fell like wheat before the scythe. Meanwhile, Navara had been wielding the talisman of St. Markovia to deadly effect, stunning the vampires as they crawled off the walls, and blasting them with her magic. Now she stood encircled by a growing heap of their blasted corpses. When she saw the swarm turning their attention against Henry, she focused her efforts on paralyzing and let Henry do the slaying. With the talisman and the sun sword at work, the spawn of Ravenloft were cut down in droves. Much had changed since their first encounter with vampires at the coffin shop. A body dropped at Rowen's feet, splattering blood on her boots. She jumped over it to avoid another slash of Rahadin's sword. Casimir hurled a bolt of lightning, but it glanced off the chamberlain's shield and struck the ceiling, blanketing the room in a shower of dust and debris. Each time her uncle attacked, Rowen tried to catch him on her spear point, but each time he was able to slip past the tip, and she was forced to defend herself with the haft as though it were a quarterstaff. Finally, after dodging away from another swipe of his sword, she put enough distance between them to cast a spell. A jet of flames exploded at Rahadin, but he raised his shield and the spell rebounded toward Rowen. Just in time, she ducked, and the fire crashed into a bookshelf behind her. Keithlin scurried away from the falling books to cower under the stone lectern. Rowen cursed, realizing her opponent's shield gave him protection against spells. "What did you accomplish by betraying our people?" Rowen asked, raising her spear to meet another attack. "What did Strahd give you? Rank?" She parried a strike. "Power?" His sword almost clipped her nose. "Did vengeance on your own people ever bring you happiness?" Rahadin's eternal frown turned into an angry scowl, but he did not relent. The next flourish of his blade grazed her arm, opening a gash above the elbow. "What did I ever do to make you hate me?" Rowen asked. Casimir cast a spell of telekinesis from his wand, and almost sent Rahadin tumbling down the staircase. But a flick of the chamberlain's buckler turned the spell, and Casimir slammed against a wall. "Because it should have been me," Rahadin said, pivoting again to Rowen. "But Strahd wanted to choose you. just like he chose my brother over me. Metis, a man after his own heart, is what he used to say. But was Metis loyal? Rahadin stabbed. Her spear deflected the blade. Were you? He attacked again. Just then, Casimir jumped up on a fallen bookcase and shot 3 magical darts. They passed through Rahadin's shield and his armor, striking him in the chest. Rahadin flinched. Then he leaped at the wizard with his sword. The first stroke lopped Casimir's wand in half. The second landed squarely on his shoulder, cleaving his collarbone and cutting deep into his rib cage. Another twist, and Rahadin yanked the blade free. Casimir looked down at the wound in shock. His arm and his shoulder were dangling uselessly, and the whole right side of his chest was split apart like the carcass of a slaughtered pig. A red stream was gushing from the wreckage of bones and flesh. Casimir sank to his knees. "No!" Rowen cried, but she could not reach him. Rahadin was blocking her way. "Henry, help Casimir!" Then she launched herself in a desperate charge, transforming into a direwolf. Rahadin swung his blade, but she dodged it and caught his wrist in her jaws. There was a crunch between her teeth as the bones cracked. When Rowen let go, Rahadin dropped his sword and staggered back. Instantly, Rowen bit his calf and dragged him to the floor. Rahadin smashed the iron bowl of his shield into her head. Once, twice, she saw stars. As the shield was about to strike again, she lunged at his face and fastened her jaws around his neck. Her teeth dug into his flesh, and a gush of pulsing blood filled her mouth. She clamped down, not even letting go after his body lay still. Only when she heard Navara calling her name did she release her uncle's throat. Rowen stepped away and turned back into an elf. Rahadin's eyes were staring blankly at the ceiling. Another family member dead, but she had no regrets. Henry and Navara sat by Casimir amid the carnage. All the vampires were dead or gone. It was over, for now. "Are you all right, Rowen?" Navara asked. Rowen nodded and went to Casimir, who was sitting up and wiping the blood from his mended shoulder. Casimir looked at the dead elf. "I really thought that would be the end of me." Rowen flung her arms around him. She squeezed him and said, "You need to stay alive, all right? I need you." He put his arms around her and held her as tightly as she held him. "I need you too," he said. "Henry?" Navara asked gently. Rowen and Casimir released their embrace and looked at the night. Henry sat with his head bent, a curtain of hair concealing his eyes. He ran his thumb over the embroidered flower on his cloak. "They took her," he said. "I couldn't stop it." Navara sat down beside him. "We'll get her back." Henry gritted his teeth. "I didn't do it. I promised Irina I wouldn't let them take her alive. But I didn't do it. I couldn't. I failed her." "We will rescue her," Navara said. "You know we will." Henry looked up at the warlock, tears pooling in his eyes. "But will she still be Irina?" Keithlin coughed from under the lectern. She slithered over the dead bodies, using only her hands to drag herself, as if her legs didn't work. Then she grabbed the lip of a banister with an unnaturally long arm and stood up. She muttered to herself, her tongue wagging between the gaps in her teeth. "We still have a problem," Navara said. "I was thinking—" Navara's voice faded, and Rowen heard the whispers again, but they were clearer now.
"Rowen,"
said Vampire. None of the others seemed to notice.
"Rowen von Zarevich, I know your struggles, the tireless agitation, the unquenchable thirst. I understand. Listen to me and embrace who you are. It is the only way to defeat Strahd.
The others continued talking, but Rowen followed the voice and walked down the golden staircase. Magnificent carvings adorned the glistening amber walls. They depicted scenes from forgotten times and places, kings, queens, sultans, and pharaohs, attended by armies with every kind of magical creature. When Rowen reached the bottom step, she saw it. Towering in an alcove across the vaulted chamber was a rough block of solid amber stone. She walked toward it, and noticed 2 other blocks of amber in alcoves to her left and right. But it was the stone directly across from the stairs that called her name. Just as in her dreams, she caught a glimpse of the mysterious undulating shadow within. Rowen reached out and touched the amber stone. At once she felt a cold hand resting on her shoulder, and she turned around to see her father standing beside her. "Rowen," he said. He looked as she remembered him, white hair, red eyes, and a slight twitch in the corner of his mouth. "Now you have come to your destiny. The Furies have been guiding your steps from the day I rescued you out of Barovia until now. I know I was not a kind father. I was not the father you would have preferred, but I was the father you needed. Through hardship you learned the strength you would need to defeat my brothers and avenge your mother's death. Come, Rowen, here are the answers you seek. Power to break the curse that holds Barovia. Power to destroy the man who ruined our family. Power to claim Castle Ravenloft as your birthright." Then he put his hand on the stone, and the shape within began forming into a scene. "This is who you are meant to be." The scene became clearer. Rowen was fighting with Strahd on the battlements of Ravenloft, spear against sword. Strahd was strong with his blade and fast on his feet, but Rowen matched his every move. She was faster, she was stronger. After ducking to evade Rowen's spear, Strahd tried to flee, but she cut him off. Rowen cornered her enemy at the bartizan of a tower, and with one stroke skewered him against the castle wall. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating Rowen's face. Her eyes were as red as her father's, and sharp fangs protruded from her pale lips. Then the scene changed. Rowen saw herself sitting on Strahd's throne, decked in ermine, holding an orb and scepter. Now the throne was turned right way round, and she was receiving delegations of her subjects. The whole room was filled with dusk elves, Barovians, Vistani, and mountain folk, all paying homage to their new overlord. Metis spoke again, his voice no higher than a whisper. "Accept the vampire's gift, Rowen, and you will be powerful." Somewhere in the distance she heard Henry and Navara, but she did not see them. They were calling for her.
"Rowen, come back to us," Navara said. "Let go of the stone, Rowen."
Henry yelled,
"It's hurting you! Let go!"
But Rowen's mind was somewhere deep within the amber. A new strength was flowing through her, unlike any magic she had known before. It felt like the primordial beginning of the world, infinitely dark and cold, yet full of infinite power and possibility. Everything was pain, pleasure, and potency. She craved it, all of it. It drew her like a magnetic force. But something still held her back. "What about my friends?" Rowen asked her father. "What will happen to them if I don't accept Vampire's gift?" Suddenly another scene appeared. Rowen saw herself in a wide stone chamber. She was trapped within the transparent dome of a shield wall spell, desperately struggling to break free. Though she struck it with her spear and tried to dispel the magic, it did not yield. Henry was trapped there beside her, pounding at the barrier with Apollo, but to no avail. Irina lay dead on the ground. On the other side of the shield, Strahd was bearing down on Navara, and there was no one to save her. The talisman was shaking in the warlock's hand as Strahd approached, but it could not stop him. Rowen saw despair in Navara's eyes. There was no hope left. Then, with a roar of triumph, Strahd grabbed Navara and bit down on her neck. "No!" Rowen yelled, and the vision disappeared. "Without a vampire," said her father, "you will never defeat Strahd." "What's the blood price?" Rowen asked, remembering that Strahd had killed his own brother to seal the pact with the vampire. "I'm not like Strahd. I'm not a murderer." "You've already paid it," her father said. "You slew your own kin in the library upstairs. You can still taste his blood on your mouth." Rowen licked her lips. "Whiskers!" came Henry's voice again. "I can't heal you. You're growing cold. You're dying. You must let go." Rowen did feel her mortal life slipping away, but she knew she wouldn't die. Soon she would be quite incapable of dying. "Say the words, Rowen," her father said. "Accept the gift."
"Rowen,"
said Navara's voice.
"if you can hear me, fight whatever evil is holding you. Don't give in. Don't let it take you like it's taken him."
Rowen thought of Strahd. Strahd von Zarovich had once stood here in the Amber Temple all those centuries ago, just a man. He had come for the wrong reasons. Jealousy and pride had driven him into the arms of the dark powers. Rowen was here to save Barovia. She was here to do good. Surely if she accepted this gift, she would be a better steward of its power than Strahd had been. But as she felt the dark magic rising within her, everything else was overshadowed by her desire for vengeance. Yet surely vengeance against Strahd would be justified. He deserved to suffer every pain and every loss he had meted out. He had to be killed. The curse had to be lifted. If she were a vampire, then she would be able to restore justice. She would not allow vampires' influence to corrupt her. She was strong enough to resist, wasn't she?
"Where were Henry and Navara?" Rowen asked her father. "In the vision I saw, where I'm a vampire and I defeat Strahd. I never saw them. What happens to Casimir? To Irina? What will happen to my friends if I accept vampire?"
"You are the true master of this valley," her father said. "If they were your friends, then they would live to serve you loyally. If they do not accept you as my champion, however, then you will be justified in destroying them. Now, make the pact." As she listened, Rowen noticed for the first time that her father's voice was different. It was not the voice of Baron Metis. It never had been. It was only the voice of Vampire himself, and as she felt the gift at her fingertips, she knew she could not control it, no more than Strahd had done. The dark powers would take control. Eventually, they would turn her against her friends, and she would be trapped in a wretched prison of her own making. "I will not become a monster," Rowen said, and she let go of the stone. The cold that pervaded her body suddenly became excruciating. She fell back. Henry and Navara caught her in their arms. "Hold on, Whiskers," Henry said. "Let's see if this works now." He laid his hands on her chest and spoke the words of healing. Slowly, very slowly, the cold and the pain faded away. Rowen blinked her eyes. She still felt a lingering anger. She still felt thirsty. But seeing her friends' caring faces made the feelings subside. "Thank you," she said.
"Oh, Rowen."
Navara hugged her. "Where's Casimir?" Rowen asked, remembering that she had not heard his voice while she was in the trance.
I don't know,"
Navara said, looking around.
"All three of us left Keithlin to come and look for you, and—"
Just then a magical wind blew around them, and black clouds appeared above the floor in the center of the room. The clouds plunged in on themselves until they gave shape to a woman. In the alcove to their right, standing before a different amber stone, was Casimir. One of his hands was on the stone, and his eyes were rolled back in his head.
"Casimir!"
Rowen shouted, running to him.
"Casimir, can you hear me?"
"Yes," Casimir said, though his white eyes were twitching violently.
"Don't listen to Vampire,"
Rowen said. Her hair was thrashing around her face from the blasting wind.
"Don't do what he says. Let go of the stone."
"This is not Vampire," Casimir said. "It is Zudun, the corpse star. He has the power to bring my sister back to life. I had dreams of her, Rowen. She wants to come back and make amends. She has forgiven me for what I did. She told me to come to the Amber Temple, but I needed help to enter its depths. That's why I led you here." The form in the center of the room began to grow in substance. Misty shadows twined together into physical sinews and ligaments. Real blood began to flow through the veins of materializing flesh.
"How do you know your dreams were real?"
Rowen asked Casimir, thinking of her own dreams and wondering the same thing.
"What if it was only the dark powers who brought you here to deceive you?"
"I don't know," he said. "Rowen, what's happening?" Henry asked, holding his hand against the wind, shielding his eyes. "I have to believe she repented," Casimir cried. "I need to tell Petrina how sorry I am."
"Petrina!"
Navara yelled through the gale.
"Petrina! Casimir, stop! Petrina's in league with the dark powers."
Rowen looked at the elven woman coalescing among the black clouds. She was almost fully formed. Then Rowen turned to Casimir.
"Listen to me,"
she said in his ear. She held his hand that was not on the stone.
"Maybe Petrina has changed, but whatever is happening now is wrong. No light can come from darkness. No good can come from evil."
After a moment, Casimir tore himself from the stone and held fast to Rowen. He was shaking all over. The wind stopped as abruptly as it had come, but the woman in the center of the room was still growing more corporeal. Thick, glossy black hair was rippling down her shoulders. She opened her eyes and set her feet upon the ground. Casimir looked up.
"Petrina," he said, "is it really you?"
Henry, brandishing Apollo, walked up to the stone that Casimir had called Zudun. The dark shadow within it recoiled at the sunlight. Then Henry struck Apollo against the rock. The sword rang, and the woman in the center of the room vanished in a cloud of smoke. A scream cried out, and the ground shook. Now there was a crack in the amber, and Henry struck again. Again there was a cry and a shaking of the whole temple. But this time Rowen realized that the screams were coming from up in the library.
"Henry!"
Navara shouted.
"I think what you're doing is hurting Keithlin."
But Henry did not stop. He continued hacking away at the amber until the huge stone shattered apart. Without a word, Henry proceeded to cut down the amber rock in the other alcove, and then, finally turning upon the stone that held Vampire.
"I can offer you anything,"
Vampire's voice spoke aloud.
"A way to defeat your brother. A way to—"
Henry dragged Apollo's edge across the amber. It made a horrible grinding noise. Vampire shrieked.
"You may destroy this vessel," But the dark powers are eternal.
Henry brought his sword down like a sledgehammer, and the amber burst into 1,000 pieces. For a moment, all was silent. Then Rowen turned around and saw Keithlin standing at the foot of the stairs. The hag glared at them and said,
I remember everything.